Evening guests to Pear-Fection, Preserving a Favorite Fall Fruit, presented to you by the UC Master Food Preserver online program. I am Monica Gross, your MC for the evening. We have a question and answer moderator. Her name is Jill MacArthur.
Hello.
And we have two presenters tonight, Ellen Goodwin and Shalinda Wilkins. So here's a reminder that the program is being recorded. The copy of this slide deck and class handouts with recipes will be sent to attendees who complete the post-class survey. Please keep your mics muted when not speaking. During live questions, unmute and speak or raise your Zoom hand. At any time, type questions or comments in the Zoom Q&A feature. Open this from the menu bar at the bottom of your Zoom screen. If you don't see Q&A on your bar, click More, and then select Q&A from the pop-up menu. Again, during open discussion, just speak up. So who are we? We're the UC Master Food Preservers online delivery program, and we are a community outreach, online-based, grant-funded volunteer program within the University of California Division of Agriculture and Natural Resources. And we provide up-to-date research-based information on food safety and preservation. This is a picture of one of our training labs with some of our MFPs. So our mission is to keep Californians safe and well as they use culturally appropriate research-based practices to safely preserve food in the home, reducing food waste, increasing food security, and providing engaging ways for Californians to explore healthy food. The thoughts, views, and opinions expressed are the speaker's own and do not represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of the University of California. The University of California name and all forms and abbreviations are the property of its owner, and its use does not imply endorsement of or opposition to any specific organization, product, or service. So that means if we show a particular type of equipment here, we're not really endorsing that type of equipment. You could use any equipment of a similar nature. Today's program includes spiced pears, presented by Ellen Goodwin, and pear leather, presented by Shalinda Wilkins. So our first topic is spiced pears.
Thank you, Monica. So, every time when fall begins, I start thinking about making things that have warm spices like ginger and cloves and cinnamon. And these spiced pears have all of those really wonderful flavors. And they can be eaten just as they are, or you can use them, you can put them on top of yogurt or oatmeal or ice cream. You can throw them into a fruit salad. Recently, I added them to a carrot and apple salad that included dried cranberries. And I used some of the liquid to make a creamy dressing, and the result was really tasty. You can use any type of firm, ripe pear for this recipe. So that could be a Bartlett, an Anjou, a Bosc. The only type that I wouldn't recommend would be an Asian pear. And that's because Asian pears have less acid than other pears. So if you want to preserve Asian pears, you should look for a recipe that specifically calls for Asian pears. Oh, next slide. So today's recipe comes from a book called So Easy to Preserve, which was created by the Cooperative Extension at the University of Georgia. The book is available online, and it's a great source of safe and tested recipes. We always recommend that you use a recipe that's been tested in a lab, and the reason we do that is because, unlike our kitchens, food safety labs have the ability to test things like the temperature inside a jar during processing. And it's important that recipes reach a certain temperature in order to destroy any microorganisms, any unwanted microorganisms. such as Clostridium botulinum, which you may have heard of. It causes botulism, which of course is a very serious and occasionally fatal disease. Now, other good sources of safe tested recipes are the Complete Guide to Home Canning, which is produced by the United States Department of Agriculture, and the Ball Complete Book of Home Preserving. Both of those are available online. And actually, a really good free source of recipes is the UC Master Food Preserver Program website. If you go to the website and click on resources, you will find a wealth of recipes and guidance. So next slide, please. So the recipe I'm going to be talking about today is a hot pack recipe. And that means we put hot food into hot jars. And then the jars are processed in a boiling water bath canner. You can see a picture here of that's a very classic looking boiling water bath canner. And I used a boiling water bath canner. You'll see that in the photos in a moment. But you could also process this recipe using a steam canner. And so a steam canner consists of 3 separate pieces: a shallow pan that's filled with about 2 quarts of water, a perforated rack, and the jars sit on that, and a large dome cover. You can use a steam canner instead of a water bath canner when you're processing any high acid food, and pears and other fruits qualify as high acid foods. And the recipe has to have a processing time of less than 45 minutes. A lot of people who do home preservation really like steam canners because they take a lot less water. They're a lot faster to heat up. You're not heating a big giant pot of water. And when you're finished canning, you don't have to dump that big heavy pot of water out. So, steam canners are great. But as I said, I did use a water bath canner for this presentation. And you can use, actually, I used one that was specifically made for that purpose, but you don't have to do that. You can use any large pot so long as it has a tight fitting lid, some sort of a rack to put the jars on so they will not sit directly on the bottom. And it has to be tall enough to have about 2 inches of water over the tops once the jars are actually on the rack. Another type of canner you may have heard of is a pressure canner. It is primarily used to process low acid foods like meat, beans, and vegetables. We're not going to be talking about that tonight, but there's a lot of information on the UC Master Food Preserver Program website about pressure canning also. Next slide, please. So to start with, of course, you clean all your work surfaces with hot soapy water and rinse everything really well. And I would suggest that you clean things that you're going to touch during the processing, like maybe your refrigerator handle, maybe your phone. And then, of course, collect your equipment. And so what I've got here is a jar lifter, a thermometer, a wand with a magnet on the end, and that helps to pick up lids, like if you've got them in warm water, and a plastic tool that is used to measure headspace in a jar. Next slide. So one of the first steps is to fill your boiling water bath canner half full of water and begin heating it. The canners are kind of large and it does take a while to get that water hot. And then check your jars for any cracks or nicks. And the reason is a jar that has a crack or a nick sometimes can break when it's in the canner being processed. And so you can't, don't use anyone that has a crack or a nick in it or a big scratch even. And then also I would recommend maybe boiling a little extra water in a kettle or another pot in case you don't have quite enough when you start the process. So wash your jars in hot soapy water, rinse them and place them on a rack in the canner, and that's without their lids. Heat the water to 180 degrees and maintain that temperature with the jars. And this is just to keep the jars hot. Because you're going to put hot food in and you don't want to put in hot food into a cold jar, could cause the jar to crack. And then you are going to wash your rings in hot soapy water. And the rings and the jars can be used for years and years, assuming there are no nicks or cracks on your jars. I'm sure there are people out there who are using jars that their grandmothers used, but lids, which are just the round flat piece, you can only use one time. They will not seal correctly more than once. So prepare new lids according to the manufacturer's instructions, and you'll find those in the box with the lids, and set those aside. Next. So to prepare the pears, you just wash them under cool running water, peel, core, and slice them, and then put them into a solution of 1/2 of a teaspoon of ascorbic acid and 2 quarts of water. And this just prevents browning. It makes them look more appetizing when you're after you've canned them. You can find ascorbic acid online, or sometimes you can find it in a canning section of a grocery store or a hardware store. Next slide. And then the next step is to prepare the syrup. And once you fill out the survey, you will get the recipe, which has all the exact amounts. But you'll combine the sugar, the vinegar, and the water, bring it to a boil. And then the recipe explains this, but you put the spices into some kind of a small bag. You can also wrap them in a little bit of cheesecloth and tie it with string. And so you put that into your syrup and you boil that for 5 minutes. Next slide. Then you drain those pears that have been sitting there in the water and ascorbic acid, and then you add the pears to the syrup and you simmer that for 5 minutes or approximately 5 minutes until they're softened but still firm, and then remove and discard the spice bag. Next slide. Now to fill the jars, you're going to pull them out. I did it one at a time and pull them out of the canner. They're nice and hot. Put them onto a towel or a rack rather than a cold countertop, and pack in the pears. Really helps to have a funnel. You can see that in the picture here. Put your pears in and leave 1/2 inch of headspace. Then add the hot syrup and again leave 1/2 inch of head space. And then use maybe a chopstick or some kind of a thin plastic tool you kind of just poke it down in to remove any air bubbles. And don't use metal because that can scratch or nick the jar, and that can create a weak spot. Then you're going to wipe the rim of the jar with a wet paper towel or a paper towel dipped in white vinegar. A lot of people do that because you want to make sure that rim is completely clean in order to have that lid seal. And then place a lid on the jar, screw on a ring, and just finger tight. Next slide. And then place them onto the rack in your canner, and there must be at least 1 inch of water above the lids. Put the canner's lid on, adjust the heat to high to get the water boiling vigorously. You're going to want to maintain a pretty good boil. And then this recipe calls for the processing the pears for 15 minutes. Now, if for any reason your burner, maybe someone walks through your kitchen and turns the burner off, and the boiling stops or the boiling really reduces, you need to bring the heat back up, start the boiling again, and time from the beginning. So let's say you were already 10 minutes in. If the burner got turned off and it stopped boiling, you would bring it back to a boil, start over for the entire 15 minutes. Next slide. And if you live more than 1,000 feet above sea level, then you have to increase your processing time. And this is because water boils at a lower temperature at a higher altitude. So if you live between 1,001 and 6,000 feet above sea level, you will add 5 minutes, which would bring you to a total of 20 minutes to process these spiced pears. If you live above that, you're going to have to add 10 minutes, and that'll be a 25-minute processing time. Next slide. So when the processing time is over, turn off the heat, remove the lid, and let the jars just sit in the canner for 5 minutes. They're really, really hot, and this just helps everything start to settle. And it's part of the sealing process as well. When the 5 minutes are over, carefully lift the hot jars out of the canner using a jar lifter, and be sure not to tip the jars, and then set them onto a towel or a cooling rack and leave them completely undisturbed for 12 to 24 hours or until they're completely cool. Don't try to dry them off. Don't do anything at this point. Just let them sit there. Next slide. And then after 12 to 24 hours, when the pears are going to be completely cool to the touch, you can check the seals by pressing on the lid. If the lid goes up and down, it's not sealed, but hopefully it will be sealed. And you can also take the rings off and lift the jar up a little bit and it should hold. If you're holding it by the lid, it should not move or become detached. Any jars that are not sealed, and that that does happen occasionally for a variety of reasons, but any jars that are not sealed should be stored in the refrigerator and eaten within 2 weeks. Or if it's less than 24 hours since you pulled them out of the canner, you can reprocess them and it's still safe. So in order to reprocess, you would take the ring off, take the lid off, throw that lid away because like I mentioned before, you can only use a lid once. So you will take everything off, check the jar for chips or cracks that could have prevented it from sealing if there's a chip or maybe even a large scratch. And then put on a brand new lid, clean the rim, put on a brand new lid, put on the ring, put them back in the canner, and bring it back to a boil. Do the whole 15 minutes again. But assuming your jars are nicely sealed, you can rinse off any residue. You take the rings off. You don't need to have the rings on to store them. So rinse them off and dry them off. You might want to put a pretty label on there. And we recommend that you use them within 12 months for best quality. Next slide. Any questions?
Yes, Ellen, we actually have 3 questions, now
Okay.
4.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. One was, if there are items in the recipe that I don't like, can I replace them with other things?
Okay. So mostly, actually, there is, yes, for the spices, yes. But that is kind of the one exception. For the most part, when you're using a recipe, a tested recipe, we would recommend that you do not change like the quantity of pears or substitute a different fruit. I would, if you want to make something different, I would find a different recipe that conforms to what you happen to like. But for the spices, dried spices, you can adjust them. Like, maybe you don't like cloves, so add a little more cinnamon, and that will still be perfectly safe. So, next question.
Yes. Can the dishwasher be used instead of hand washing jars and rings?
Yes. Yes. Now, one thing actually I should mention is that in some recipes, you need to sterilize the jars, and the dishwasher won't do that. But in this recipe, you don't have to sterilize the jars because the processing time is over 10 minutes. If you have a recipe and the processing time is under 10 minutes, then you need to sterilize the jars. And to do this, all you have to do is put them into the canner and boil them for 10 minutes. That's it. And they're sterilized. But the dishwasher is fine for the washing step if you're just washing. So,
Okay, before the next question, there is one participant who says, maybe it's just me, but I can't see the slide.
oh,
So
right now, I don't think
someone else can handle that.
Right now,
So
the
next,
slides are not visible during the question and answer period.
okay. The third question, can this recipe be used for apples?
Again, I would look for an apple recipe. I know pears and apples are very similar, but there are plenty of apple recipes out there that have been thoroughly tested. And, go to our website. You'll find a lot of apple recipes. So that's what I would suggest.
Okay. If the jar doesn't seal, but I don't want to reprocess or eat in 2 weeks, can these be frozen?
They can. I wouldn't put them straight into the freezer in the jar because that's probably not enough headspace, and jars can crack. When things freeze, they expand. So probably your best bet would be to put them into a freezer safe container, like certainly some sort of a plastic container or whatever you have or use. And yes, you definitely can freeze them. And now when you defrost them, they could be a little more mushy, than
sugar and vinegar.
but
But she doesn't
we
say how much.
perfectly safe. Yeah.
Depends maybe how many pears you.
Okay, I have a couple more questions. If you decide to try to reprocess when the jar doesn't seal, do you need to heat the product first prior to placing the jar into the canner for processing? Or can I put the cold product and the jar in the canner?
You can put, if the jar is cold and the product is cold, you can put them into the canner. So yes, it's only if you have a hot product, you need a hot jar. So I'll turn to my panel here. Does anybody else have a different answer to that question? No? Okay, yeah. I think, yes, it's fine because you have to, by the time you bring it up to the boil and do the full processing time, that food will be processed in the jar. It'll be very hot inside the jar.
Okay, thank you. Two questions about lids. Can you use lug lids on jars, lug lid jars? And number two, if they don't seal well, can you redo it immediately to seal it?
I don't know that you might not know. Those are really good questions. And actually, I'm not familiar with lug lids. Would somebody else like to answer that?
Yeah.
Lug lid. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Shalinda.
I was gonna say a lug lid is a single lid. It's the ones you get from the store that don't have the rings on it. We normally do not recommend using those for home use because they're more for commercial use. And I understand in some locations you won't be able to get the two-piece, but we only teach the two-piece because we can find recipes and there's science behind it. So if it doesn't sell, can you do it immediately? Yes. And that's if you're using the two-piece jar or the reusable ones like a Tadler. That's also a two-piece. But as far as the lug heads themselves, we don't recommend using them and we don't teach it. Sorry.
Yes, just to confirm, we don't reach the levels of, there's always like the home process and the commercial process. The
Mhm.
commercial process is always better. It has more oomph behind it, right? And so we just don't do that. I will also say when she's saying reusing lids, she didn't also remember rust. If your lid starts to rust in any capacity as well, it has to be trash. Your lids we're going to automatically to get rid of, but if the rings, if your rings also start to develop rust, they can't be reused as well. So those also should no longer be reused.
And one last question. Does ascorbic acid noticeably alter the flavor?
I don't think so. Does anyone else have a different experience with that?
No, they do not. The ascorbic acid really is there to preserve your color and provide a little acidity, and you'll never notice it. I mean, 1/8 of a teaspoon in 2 quarts of water. Yeah, but it'll keep your pears looking pretty.
Also, if you don't have access to ascorbic acid, there are two other ways you can do that pre-treatment. One is with lemon juice, and the other is with a product called Fruit Fresh, which does the same type of thing. It allows the color to remain like beautiful pears.
There is one more question. Isn't ascorbic acid just lemon juice?
No.
I don't know the answer actually to that. Does anybody else happen to know?
Oh.
I actually I think the answer actually is no. Someone just told me that. So,
Yeah, they are not the same.
Okay.
But they do the same function in terms
Oh,
of
only
preserving
in
color.
that it's vitamin C, right? It has a vitamin C base to it, and the vitamin C is what stops the color change.
Okay.
It is not made specifically from that, but it does have the sort of same chemical properties. And we could put up this web of the chemical base that would reflect that, but it's not specifically, no.
If there are any other questions, you can answer them live. You can ask them live.
I see
Patty?
Patty has a
Mhm.
question.
Oh, yes, Patty,
Unmute yourself,
you
Patty.
can unmute.
We can't hear you, Patty. You need to unmute. The little microphone icon down there in the lower left-hand corner. There you go.
I often use orange juice concentrate
Oh, here, I see it
in
right here. Look
water
at there.
when I'm dehydrating apples, and it really doesn't affect, it adds to the sweetness of the product. But you could just use an orange juice concentrate in there, just a tiny bit, instead of ascorbic acid. But ascorbic acid does do the job, so. But I'm not one of you, so that's what I do as a consumer.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Patty.
Can anybody hear me? This is Linda Dunn.
Yes.
Oh, you can. Okay,
Yep.
we're just figuring this out. My girlfriend Becky's here, Becky Steigar, and I'm Linda Dunn. We missed the part about the amounts of sugar, vinegar, and water to make the syrup. What are the measurements?
Good question. So we didn't specify the measurements. We didn't list the recipe in the slideshow. But if you take the survey at the end of this presentation, you will get the recipe. We'll send you a handout with the detailed all the ingredients and all the steps.
You mean on Zoom and then we can print it? Is that how you do it?
Correct. Well, you do it on Zoom. The survey will come up on Zoom. Fill out the survey, and then we will send you the handout by email, I believe. Is that correct?
By email. Okay, that's what we wanted to know. Okay, thank you. So I
You're welcome.
appreciate that. Thank you.
I'll provide one correction, and this should be consistent going forward because we're always making improvements. When you leave this Zoom session, the browser in which you connected to this Zoom meeting will reload and show a survey. When you complete that survey, there will be a thank you message in that same browser. That thank you message will contain a link to the class slide deck and handout. So don't wait for an email. You should, as long as you stay with the browser, you should see a survey, then a thank you message with a link to the resources. If you don't, or if you get frustrated, don't hesitate to contact me for that. But yeah, just to clarify.
Yeah. Thank you.
And we have one more question about vinegar.
Sure.
Does vinegar taste show up in the finished product?
Yes, there's a little bit of it's a slightly sweet and sour flavor, with the spices, because there is vinegar in the recipe. So yes, you do taste a little bit of vinegar. But again, it's a sweet and sour flavor.
And Amanda, you have your hand up, unmute and ask your question.
Hi, my hand
Amanda?
was just giving a thumbs up to Travis.
Oh, sorry.
No problem. Thank you.
Okay, and I think Angela B may have had her hand up as well.
I did have my hand up, but I lowered it because I was going to ask a question that was not peer related. So I said I'd just wait.
Okay.
This is Linda Dunn. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Is that apple cider vinegar or regular white vinegar?
I think it was white vinegar that I use. I believe, actually, I don't have the recipe in front of me, but I believe that's what the recipe called for. And you will get the recipe.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes, it was white vinegar, Ellen. I have the recipe.
Okay, thanks, Mary.
And which will be mentioned, but the level of your vinegar should always be at least at a 5% level. And so when you're purchasing your vinegar for this recipe, make certain that it is a 5% level of acidity, which is very, very important. And I'm pretty certain it's mentioned in the recipe.
And that's just right. It's on the label of the jar.
Awesome.
We have one more question. Is there a low sugar option, or should we keep the sugar as in the recipe?
You should keep the sugar as in the recipe, but there are other low sugar ways to can, and you can look for specific recipes, including on our website, if you're looking for low sugar products. So for this recipe, I keep the sugar the same.
That appears to be it for questions.
All right, so we're going to move on with the presentation. And at this time, I want to introduce Shalinda, who will be talking to you about pear leather.
All right. Next slide, please. So the information and recipes tonight are from the So Easy to Preserve, the 2020 edition. Next slide, please. So let's talk about drying. Drying foods is one of the oldest methods of food preservation. Fruit leather, or food leather in this case, is dehydrated fruit or vegetables that is a puree. to get a successful fruit leather, you will need three things: the right temperature, humidity, and circulation, air circulation. Why is that important? Because it removes moisture by drying to ensure that bacteria, yeast, mold do not grow. It also slows the enzymatic reaction, which means browning. This method results in food that is lightweight, space-saving, and requires no refrigeration. Next slide, please. There are different types of drying. This diagram of different types is broken down into the outside, pasteurization, and the inside. So on the outside branch, you have sun, which is also sometimes called air drying, and solar drying. Sun drying or air drying is where you have a rack and you lay product on top of it and allow it to dry in the air. The solar drying is where you have an enclosed box or container with a clear lid that allows it to dry out in the open. Pasteurizing, which is the next branch, has two. It's the oven, which is also called a hot method, and a freezer method, which is also called the cold method. The last branch, the inside branch, has three. So there's the room drying, which most people do for herbs. You hang things upside down and allow it to dry in your house. And then there's the oven method. The oven method is where you cut your oven on to its lowest setting and then just cut it off and allow it to dry. And the final one is a dehydrator or dehydrating. Next slide, please. So there's two types of dehydrators. There's the vertical airflow version, which makes the air flow down and around the food to dry it. And then there's the horizontal, which makes the food go over and around it. And both of these tend to be important as far as drying because it's the airflow and the temperature and everything is contained. So why explain this to you? Because I'm going to discuss the pros and cons later of different types of dehydrators for fruit leather. Next slide, please. So before you move on, you're going to want to wash, rinse, sanitize, and air dry the area and the tools you're going to use. Read the recipe twice, gather all your materials, and wash your pears if you're using fresh in cool water. Next slide, please. So here's an overview of the actual recipe itself. It's very simple. 2 cups of puree, and you can have the option of sweeteners and an acid, in this case, which is just to stop discoloration because they're pears and they're light-skinned. So it's either lemon juice or ascorbic acid. And your sweeteners, at least for this recipe, will be honey, corn syrup, or sugar. Next slide, please. Now, for your fruit preparation, this will completely depend on how you plan or what kind of fruits you use. But to make the puree itself, good options would be a blender, food processor, food mill, a potato masher, or even a fork, depending on the way you choose. Now, the three types of puree choices are fresh fruit. So if you decide for fresh fruit, you're going to need to wash it. You're going to peel it. You're going to de-seed it, core it, and stem it. And then you actually would just put the pear in any way you decide. For this one, I would use either a blender, food presser, or a food mill. If you choose frozen pears, you defrost them and you drain off the liquid, and then you would puree it. And you can do any of the methods I mentioned for pureeing it. Next slide, please. If you use canned, and yes, you can use canned fruit here, that includes those spice pears you just learned about in the previous presentation. You would just drain it and puree it as well. Next slide, please. So after you're pureeing it, you have some choices. So this is where you want to add your sweetener and acid. And if you decide you're going to use spices, which is an add-on, you can add them now. Next slide, please. Now, that you have your puree and it's ready to make into leather. You're going to have to choose how you want to dry it. So when you're drying it, you can use a tray, which can be plastic or silicone, or you can use non-stick materials. So the National Center for Food Home Preservation doesn't recommend wax paper or aluminum foil, but they did make particular fruit leathers out of plastic wrap or parchment paper. Next slide, please. Okay, let's talk about the methods. So I'm going to start with the shortest time period, which is a dehydrator, which is what I use to make my batches. And my dehydrator, which has 4 racks, which are stacked, you can do 2 batches of this recipe. And it takes up to 6 hours if you do it thinly, or 8 hours if you don't. And the reason I picked it is because you can set it and then forget it. The next method is the sun method. Now, this isn't actually the shortest time, but you have to remember 2 things. In order to dry it outside or air dry it outside, the temperature must be above 85 degrees and have a low humidity, 60 or less, but 59 is better. And after you dry it outside, you would then, by the way, if you're drying outside, the time for this will vary greatly depending on these 2 variables of temperature and humidity. So it could take hours or days. You also have it outside on an open rack, so you have the problem of pests, animals, pathogens, and contamination like dirt. Even after drying it, this leather then has to be pasteurized. So you can put it in the oven at 160 degrees for 30 minutes, or you can put it in the freezer for 48 hours to ensure there's no bugs or eggs on it and to kill off any additional pathogens that might have occurred. Remember to allow either way, and any method we use, you're going to allow it to cool completely before storing it. Next slide, please. So the last method is the oven drying method. So you want to preheat your oven, set it to the lowest setting on there. For some people, that's going to be warm, and you're going to turn it off. You're going to add the puree on the tray or on the parchment or whatever you used, and then you're going to use a stick to prop it open. Now, this could take up to 2 days, and here's why. Because if the temperature falls below 140, you need to cut your oven back on and heat it back up to 140 and then cut it off again. And you need to repeat this until it's dry. So that's why it takes up to 2 days. Next slide, please. So how do you speed this process up? You want more airflow with a current speed, or less puree and a thinner spread. And if you're doing it in the oven like this with the fan, you're going to want a thermometer of some time. You can use an analog or a digital. A digital allows you to set a timer on it so you can check it, or it'll beep. Next slide, please. So those add-ons, which are the toppings or additions. When you're drying it, you can either dry it fully dry, because you have to test it. And when you're testing it, you're looking to see if it's sticky, or if it has what we call wet spots. If it has wet spots, it's going to need more time. But if it's just sticky, but it doesn't stick to your finger, like it feels kind of tacky, that's when you can add other spices or even nuts and dry fruit, and it'll stick to it. And then you would just leave it in the dehydrator and let it finish drying up to the point where it's no longer tacky. Next slide, please. And the shelf life. So the shelf life of fruit leather, when you just dry it with no added toppings like spices or anything, is up to a month. Although in my family, it's about 3 days. Now, if you have made a lot of fruit leather, or you've made something that you just don't want right now, you can always wrap it up and put it in the freezer with a label, and it'll last up to a year. Now, when you're ready to eat it, take it out of your freezer, defrost it in your refrigerator, and then just peel off the pieces you want and eat it within the 2 weeks period. Next slide, please. I'm sorry, next slide, please. Oh, wait, right there. Thank you. So here's some common issues that you're going to face. It didn't dry enough in the 8 hours. So you're going to have to add more time, and that could be set because of your temperature or humidity in your area. It crumbles like glass or a glassing effect. It could be because you spread it way too thin or you over dried it. A lacy appearance could be caused by your puree needing to be blended better or too much liquid during the blending process, and it causes this kind of lacing effect that you see in the second image. Or you just picked a fruit that wasn't very great for leather, like banana or blueberry. And in that case, you would need to add applesauce to make it more of a fruit leather and less of a hot mess. It could also remain sticky, which it's not always because it's, needs more drying time, but if it does, just dry it more. It could also be because you use corn syrup. So corn syrup takes longer to dry. You might want to use a little less of it. If it's not sweet enough, you can add more sugar at the beginning. Just add more sweetener, or you can dip it in a candy coating or chocolate once it's dry. If it's not spicy enough, you might want to add a little more. It's 1/8 of a teaspoon is what the recipe calls for, but you can also add it at the end. Or when it's dry, or when it's at that tacky stage as well. Now, if it becomes sticky after you've dried it and it was completely dried, don't worry. It's probably because you have moisture in the air of your house and it's basically re-moisturizing itself. So you can re-dehydrate it. Just put it right back in any of the methods that I talked about today. Next slide, please. So, any questions about fruit leather?
Anyone who has a question, please unmute and ask your question live.
I have a question. Maybe I missed this, but how do you store the fruit leather? Is it just in a Ziploc bag, or I have no idea.
Okay, so when you make the fruit leather, once it's dried, you want to completely cool it. Then if you're planning to eat it immediately, you can store it in any container and you just want to keep it cool and dry. Now, I store it in a glass container and put it on my table, and my kids eat it all the time. But for longer storage, like I said, you wrap it and then you'll stick it in the freezer and just unwrap it and then eat it. So I use parchment paper between the layers of actual fruit leather, and then I just pull it off and we leave it in the fridge for up to 2 weeks. It doesn't last that long, but you can theoretically.
Thank you. That sounds
Thank
great.
you.
Oh, we do have another question.
Yes.
Can you make fruit leather out of grapes?
I don't remember grapes being on it. I think it would be a little harder because of the juice content in it to actually do grapes. But I think if you added maybe some applesauce, you could probably get away with it. But it won't be a lot of grape flavor if that's what you're looking for.
Any more questions? Oh, Patty, you have your hand up.
Yeah,
Please unmute.
I might have missed this. How thick? So you have 2 cups of puree. I use a dehydrator. How do you apply that if I have 4 trays?
Yes. If you have 4
The
trays,
spread, I'm afraid of it oozing through the tray.
okay, so do you have a horizontal or a vertical? So do you have a square flat one or a circle one?
A flat one, yeah.
Okay, so the flat ones, what you're going to want to do is put parchment paper down and then put the puree on top of it. And because there are 4, you'll probably be able, depending on how big they are, you'll have to measure it out, but it's normally about a cup per level if you're doing it in a dehydrator.
Okay, I obviously wasn't listening to that part. Thank you.
It's okay.
Okay. Sounds good.
It is. It's delicious and it's great for hikes, and it's great to have on hand, especially if you freeze it for someone who might be diabetic. If you don't add the sugar to it, it could be a quick way of helping them with their blood sugar if you don't have apple juice or orange juice or something. So
And
it's one of those quick, it's a quick.
And I am pre-sweetened, so that will work perfectly for for my needs. What kind of pears do you recommend?
I used red pears and those were pretty sweet, but if you don't want them to be sweet, you could always use the Bos, which is the BOSC ones. And those were pretty flavorless. I actually added cinnamon to that and a little sugar. because it wasn't up to the standards my kids want. So
Right. Okay, thank you.
thank you.
We have another question. Have you ever used leathers in baking?
I don't use them directly in baking, but I use them as I'll cut out shapes to put on pies and breads, and you can always do that. As far as baking directly, because it is a dehydrated fruit, and if you're using sugar, it could potentially melt depending on what kind of sweetener you used, and it could cause some problems with it not letting your baked good completely bake through, because it would basically be something dry trying to absorb moisture out of your baked goods. But if you're using it for a topper, like on a cupcake or a cake, a pie or candy, it would be fine, as long as you're not trying to put it on something wet that it might suck out moisture, because that's what it's doing when you dry it and it sits in your house and literally gets sticky again. So anything that's dry, you could probably get away with.
Patty, go ahead. Or your hand is up.
We can't hear you, Patty.
Patty, can you unmute, please?
I didn't think my hand was up. I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. Any more questions? That appears to be it on questions.
Okay, so we'll resume the slide deck at this time. So we want to let you know about future programs. We do have a monthly program called Ask a Master Food Preserver. The next one is Sunday, October 19th, which is this coming Sunday from 4 to 5 p.m. And you can register on the website or through the QR code. The second in the series of the Pear classes is called Pear-Licious, Preserving the Flavors of Fall. This is October 25th from 10 to 11 a.m. And lastly, Apples, Apples, Apples by the same group of Master Food Preservers. That will be on November 8th from 1 to 2 p.m. So you can register on the website or using the QR codes. We do have a monthly newsletter that you could sign up for. We are represented on Facebook and Instagram, and you can join that group and follow us there. And lastly, if you'd like to become a Master Food Preserver, this is the application period at this time of year. We have introductions that are offered for you to understand what the program is all about. And after you attend one of these introductory classes that are online, then you would go through the application process. So when you depart this Zoom, a brief survey will pop up in your browser. Please complete it to help us improve, and we'll send you the slide deck and the handout with the recipes and tips. So you'll get it immediately after you fill the recipe out tonight after this class. Thank you for your time and interest, and happy preserving to all of you.